York County is so much more than just a stop for gas on I-80. 17 County is filled with unique individuals with unique stories just waiting to be told. Welcome to the 17 County Podcast with your host, Emily Perry.
This is 17 County Podcast. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and listen. This helps our podcast grow, and we thank you for your continued support. We would also like to take the time to thank our York County Development Corporation members, AgriProducts, Cornerstone Bank, Nebraska Public Power District, and Central Valley Ag. Without these great members, we wouldn't be able to focus on the growth and development of York County here at the YCDC. So thank you. Let's get to the podcast. So today on the podcast, I have a special guest, Trey Perry. He is actually my husband, so he graciously decided to help us out here. He is the multimedia, English, speech in one act, a little bit of everything coach for McCool Junction Public Schools. And yeah, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, glad to be here. I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts, and you're, of course, doing some great work for the YCDC, so I'm happy to be included in one of those episodes, so I'm excited.
Sure. So let's just jump right into the interview portion. Just to start off, let's tell listeners where you're from.
Okay, so a little backstory. I was actually born in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which of course you know, but a lot of people don't know that. So I was born there. I'm the oldest of all of my brothers. I have 5 younger brothers now, but at the time my parents met in Nebraska. My mom's from Nebraska, my dad's from New Mexico, and my dad had a traveling job, and they met in Nebraska and then moved back to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and had me. And then when I was about 2.5 years old, they moved back to Nebraska because, like I said, my mom's from here, and they didn't want me to quite go through the school system in New Mexico because it's a little bit more rough. And so they decided to move back to Nebraska for those reasons. And so after we moved back to Nebraska, we lived in a couple different places for a little bit. We lived in Silver Creek for a period of time when I was little, but then we moved to the York area, and my parents did get divorced when we were younger. So my mom lived in McCool initially, and my dad lived in York, and me and my brother Tristan would just switch off back and forth every week between the houses. And so we've been in the York and McCool area ever since.
Yeah, there's a couple different schools around here. What school system did you go through?
So when we started school, we were in York, and my mom and dad decided to send us to preschool at the big Methodist church across from Copsa Odie. So we went to preschool there, and then we went to Emmanuel, actually, here in York. And I went there from kindergarten through 4th grade, and Tristan went there from kindergarten through 2nd grade. And then our other brother, Tommy, also went there for a year, and Justin. But then after my 4th grade year, they transferred us to McCool, and then we all graduated from there. So I went to McCool from 5th grade to graduation, and the rest of my brothers also graduated there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously it wasn't as simple as graduating from McCool, decide to be a teacher, come back and teach at McCool. So what was your career path like? You graduate from McCool. Where'd you go to school? What did you do then?
So after I graduated from McCool, I always liked going to Doane College. We competed there every year at an indoor track meet. They always host a high school indoor track meet every year, and they still do. And whenever we went there for the first track meet of the year, between events, me and my friends would kind of go and just check out around campus, and I loved the campus. I still think it's one of the most beautiful campuses in Nebraska. I always liked the idea of going to Doane. I did look at a couple other schools. I was really close to going to Nebraska Wesleyan. Really enjoyed my visit there. At first, I wanted to go into athletic training. I thought I wanted to work with athletes, and I'm a huge basketball fan, so I had a dream of going and working with NBA players. But after I decided to go to Doane, I got into my first couple science classes, which you need if you're going to go into any sort of medical field. And science and math don't compute in Trey's brain. After my first semester, my freshman year, I was just thinking of what else I would want to do besides athletic training, because that just wasn't working out. And my mom actually gave me the idea of looking into broadcasting or TV of some sort, because she always told me that I wasn't shy and that I always liked to mess around with technology and be in front of the camera and stuff like that. And so that kind of planted the seed of going into journalism. And so I went and talked to the journalism advisor at Doane at the time. Shout out Swartz, if you ever listen to this, you're awesome. And he told me about it, and we got me enrolled in my first journalism class, which was basic news writing and reporting. And from there, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with going and interviewing people, talking to different people, working at the radio station on campus, working at the TV station on campus. Made a lot of friends in the journalism department. And again, my advisor, Swartz, he's just an awesome professor and really looked out for us. Ended up going into journalism. I also competed on the college speech team there at Doane for a couple years. And then, so after I graduated from Doane with my bachelor's in journalism, I was lucky enough to get a job right away at 1011 News in Lincoln as a news producer. And that was super cool, because I grew up watching Ken Shimmick and Kevin Suits on the news all the time, and that was always the news channel that my parents watched. And I was gonna be working with these celebrities and so I went and worked there as a news producer. And while I was there, I worked with John Vanderford and Taryn Vanderford, who, if anybody's ever watched Pure Nebraska on Channel 10, they of course host that show, and they have for a long time. So I actually helped them produce that show every day and put it together. Then I also helped produce the noon show and the 5 p.m. newscast every day during the week.
I'm actually going to pause you just for a minute, because I don't think people fully understand, what is producing a show?
Producing, what on TV, when you're watching a newscast, you see the anchors talking and reading stories, and then of course you see the video and the pictures that accompany those stories in the newscast. And it's not just the anchors or the meteorologists that put all that up on the screen. There's dozens of people behind the scenes making sure that the shows run smoothly. And so my job as the producer was essentially to put the shows together every single day and run them behind the scenes. And so that entailed putting graphics together that played in the show, cutting the video and the audio that you see in the show as well, organizing stories and reporters throughout the show, because you can't just throw random stories in a random order in a newscast. It doesn't work that way. There's so many different factors with timing and just how a story is going throughout the day. So I organized the show every day, and like I said, cut all those elements, and I even wrote stories myself that reporters weren't working on. So a whole bunch of stuff, writing stories, cutting video, audio, and then during the show, I'm actually, like, one of my main jobs was to talk into the anchor's ears while the show is going on, letting them know, hey, we're going to a 2-minute commercial break, and then counting them down from commercial. Or if breaking news was happening, I had to tell them, we just got this update. I'm going to throw this graphic in really quick and slide some things around. And so a lot of it was a lot of multitasking and paying attention to a million different components at the same time. So producing it's a big job, and you don't realize all the work that actually goes into a newscast until you work in live TV. And
you were there during an interesting point in history. You lived through and worked through a lot of crisis type moments. I guess go into that and the big hitting news, what that was like to work through, because it's not necessarily your typical 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, so I graduated from Doane in 2019, and that spring was the year that we had those massive floods in Nebraska, because that bomb cyclone with all the snow and rain and everything hit, and then it warmed up and everything melted. And so I'm sure a lot of people remember just the crazy floods that we had across the state. And so I started my job only a month or two after those. And so I was coming in when people were still talking about that, and there was still some continuing coverage of communities that went through that when I started the job. And then, of course, I'm coming up on almost my year anniversary of working there. And in my head, and if anybody's worked in news before, you know how this works, but like when something big like those floods happen, like a year later, you put together stories like, here are these communities a year after this disaster, and you do some follow-up stories with the people that were affected by it. So in my head, and in a lot of other people's heads, we were like, okay, we're getting ready to do some year anniversary coverage of the floods that happened. But everybody knows what happened in March of 2020. The pandemic hits, and that threw a wrench in all of society. But in the news world, it was insane because first off, like our physical newsroom was transformed. If anybody's ever been in a newsroom, it's a very much like a community kind of group setting where tables and desks are close together. Everybody's yelling things at each other because news gets crazy, and you have to because you have to communicate with each other in real time. And so we're all close together and talking to each other all the time. And so when the pandemic hit, our management had to put up plastic barriers in between all of our desks. We obviously weren't allowed I couldn't go into the control room during newscasts anymore because that's another close environment. I had to produce from my desk in the newsroom instead of in the control room during the shows, and that was weird. We had to wear masks. We had to stay a certain amount of feet away from each other. And so physically, that was just crazy, but also like it transformed our coverage every day too. I remember I was working with Bill Shamert, who's at KETV in Omaha now, and he taught me a ton while I was there. But we had this segment called Just Home Headlines in the 5 p.m. newscast where it was targeted towards people that would come home maybe a little later in the day between the 5:15, 5:20 p.m. time mark. And the Just Home Headlines was meant to just give them a quick update. Oh, you just got home. Here's the big news of the day. But when the pandemic hit, it was such a big deal, and there was such constant updates of how this many more people died today, or this school shut down, this YMCA shut down, stuff like that. And so we completely changed the Just Home Headlines section into COVID-19 headlines for I don't know how many months. And so, yeah, living through the pandemic and working in news at the time was crazy because we had to completely change how we went about things. Usually we had a team meeting every day to update, for reporters to update us on the stories they were covering. We couldn't do those anymore. We had to communicate entirely through our computers. We used Microsoft Teams at the time. And then eventually, I think everybody at one point got exposed to the virus in some way, but I was exposed to it, and I know you remember this because you were at home with me, but I was exposed to it through a family member, and I didn't really have any major symptoms or anything. I was fine, but I still felt obligated to tell my boss about it, and once I did, they decided they were going to try me producing the shows remotely from home. And we had just moved from Lincoln to Fairmont. And so it's not like I was only like 15, 20 minutes away. Like when I first started at 1011, I was an hour away now. So they were a little nervous about how I would do this from home. And they'd never tried it before. And so they sent me home with a work laptop. They set me up with a VPN. And it worked. I printed from I think July or late June, early July of 2020 through the rest of the time that I was at 1011 for the most part, which I left 1011 in January of 2021. So 6 months, I produced Pure Nebraska, the noon show, the 5 p.m. show from our home office an hour away, which was a crazy experience. It was a cool experience, but you get to miss the office and the newsroom after a while. Right. So the pandemic was a huge one. And then also in the midst of the pandemic, that was when everything happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis. And there were protests and riots in Lincoln. I'm sure a lot of people remember that too. And I got called into the office a couple times to help cover the riots that were going on. And that was a crazy experience because emotions were just high in all sorts of ways. And I remember one night I was there till 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, helping cover the protests as people were walking down O Street during all this, and just watching the video and the stories that the reporters would come back to the station with was just eye-opening and crazy time. Yeah. And then and the last week of my time at 1011, it was my last Wednesday there. My last day was going to be on Friday, so I was literally 2 days away from starting my next job. It was when January 6th happened and they stormed the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And I remember because I was training my replacement and I was like, there's not too much happening today. It'll be an easy show to put together. There's not a whole lot of big news. And I was actually letting her put the show together for the first time by herself, really, with me just being in the background. And then I turn, and in the newsroom at 1011, we've got a bunch of TVs on the walls so that we can watch different networks, and if anything happens, we can see it. And I turn, and on CBS, they had a cut-in, which, if anybody doesn't know what a cut-in is, it's when they stop your regular programming, and it happens a lot with weather, and they cut in and they give you breaking news updates. And so a cut-in was going on, and it was video of people storming the Capitol. And I just sat there and watched it for a little bit, and then I turned to the person I was training, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to take over. And that was a crazy day. I remember my news director coming over to me and being like, you're going to have to reorganize the show. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I think that was like 30 minutes to an hour before the show we were going to be live. So I had to completely figure out how we were going to lead with that and how to structure that before the show happened. And so, yeah, I worked in news. I worked through a lot of exciting times in news. Yeah. But then after 1011, which I missed that job sometimes. It was a really fun job, but we moved back home and the commute got to be too much and we wanted to start a family, and I decided to try something else, and I went into marketing. I worked at the Friend Community Healthcare System in Friend as their marketing and community development coordinator. And that was a cool place. The people there are super nice. They welcomed me. I had my own office for the first time, and I got to do like my own thing, and I met some really cool people, but I just quickly learned that like marketing is not for me. So I spent about 3 or 4 months there before I decided to do something else. But while I was at Friend is when I first started to come back to McCool and help out with the speech team. I knew Sherry Thiemann, who's our head coach at McCool. I knew her from her student teaching days. I was an 8th grader when she student taught at McCool with Mrs. Davis for the first time. So I reached out to her since we were back in the area, and from being in speech in high school and speech in college, I wanted to help out and wanted to get my feet wet in coaching. And so I reached out to her and started just volunteer coaching once in a while with the speech team. And I think that's when the education bug really started to sink. Yeah. And so after I left Friend, I still wasn't quite decided to go back for education yet. I mentioned it to Sherry, and I think she might have said something to our superintendent Dade at the time, but there just wasn't anything open for me at McCool. So I left Friend and I worked remotely from home for a company out of Lincoln called Spreetail as a business development coordinator. So I've done a lot of different stuff, even though I'm only 27. And that was a really fun company to work for too. People there were great, and I actually did enjoy working from home for a little bit. And as a business development coordinator, my job was to quickly recruit new businesses that Spreetail could help out. So it was like go every day and very competitive. So it kept it exciting. And I probably would have stayed there longer. But then, like I mentioned before, Dave McDonald, he was the principal when I was at McCool as a student, and he went to Doane too. So we kept in touch throughout my college days. And like I said, he heard inadvertently that I might be interested in working in education. And so a position came up at McCool for high school Spanish proctor, which I know very little Spanish, I guess enough to maybe understand a basic conversation. But he reached out to me and said this position was open. I know it's not exactly what you have experience in, but I know you were interested in education and coaching and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, I'm going to be teaching Spanish. Okay, I'll give it a shot. And as long as I get to, like I said, I really enjoy, working with the kids at speech practices and stuff. And I wanted to continue doing that. And so after he pitched it to me and we talked some more and I talked with you about it, made the decision to go back to McCool first as a Spanish teacher and helping out in other areas while still going back to school for my education degree in English, ironically, even though I was teaching Spanish. And yeah, after my first year at McCool, I was our Spanish proctor for a year. And then after that, one of our longtime teachers there, Miss Deborah Davis, who I mentioned earlier, that Sherry Thiemann student taught for, she retired after my first year of teaching there. And so I was lucky enough to inherit her room and was also able to add some media classes to McCool's schedule. And so I transitioned after my first year of teaching Spanish to teaching freshman and sophomore English and 2 periods of media, as well as yearbook and speech, stuff like that. And this will be my 4th year at McCool now. I've finally, thank the Lord, finished my master's degree in curriculum and instruction and have my full teaching endorsement. And yeah, I've been teaching English and media for the past 3 years, and this is my 4th year at McCool now. So
yeah, you say English and media, but I don't, especially the media side of things, I don't know if people will understand what all that entails. So what all within that media realm are you in charge of?
Yeah, a lot. If you ever come to McCool during the regular school week or school day, like you'll probably just see me running around like a chicken with my head cut off. Very busy. So in my 2 media classes, we're in charge of a lot of things. When I took over media during my 2nd year at McCool, we've always had this school newsletter called The Hoofprint. And it's been put together well for years and always mailed out to people. But I just wanted to give it a fresh look. And while I was at Doane, I worked on our student newspaper there, The Owl. And I always loved working on that, writing stories and designing pages and stuff. So I was like, why don't I bring that process that I learned at Doane over to the high school side of things? And so we gave a fresh look to the Hoofprint. It's a full newspaper now. I got to give a shout out to Carrie Colburn for helping me through the initial process of getting a design template for it through the York News Times and figuring out how to print it. And so right now, my students, they write all the stories. It's an 8-page paper. We have a news section, a sports section, a feature section for the seniors that are graduating. We have a fun page where we have crossword puzzles and sketches and stuff like that too. And so it's been really like fun to put together, and all of the students put everything together for it. They write all the stories, they draw the art, they put together the crossword puzzles, and they interview everybody for all the stories. And then they put the pages together, and it comes out every month during the school year. And so the Omaha World Herald actually prints it for us and then delivers it to the York News Times here in York. And then thank you to the people at the York News Times. They deliver it to the school, and then me and the kids deliver it around McCool mostly. There are a couple places in York that we make sure to drop it off to, such as Captain Redbeard's. So that's been really cool. So the Hoofprint, and then we also put together our yearbook, which takes all year to put together, obviously. And so my students take all the pictures for that and design all the pages, come up with a theme and all that stuff. They also help me manage our school website, which we got an upgrade on that a couple years ago when I took over the media side of things. And so I'm planning on having them do a little bit more with the website this year, posting hoofprint stories, updating things more often, things like that. Then we also have a broadcast side. There are a lot of schools in the area that use Strive out of Henderson to broadcast sporting events and school events. And so we do that as well. My kids do play-by-play and announcing for all of our home events, and they run the cameras. We're adding a second camera to our broadcast this year, which I'm really excited about. So we'll have a main cam up top, and then we'll also have a floor cam for volleyball and basketball games and a field cam for football games. So they run both the cameras, they direct the show, they throw up all the graphics that you guys see and all the commercials that you see on the broadcast if you watch from home. And so that takes a lot of work and planning, and the kids have to learn how to edit video, and that's another side of our Strive/video production. Portion of it is that the kids help me put together any hype videos that we make for sports teams if they make it to state or anything like that. And then we're adding one more thing this year, a social media side, which I know that social media is obviously a crazy thing nowadays, but I wanted to figure out a way to get kids a little bit more excited about the stuff we do and to show off not only the things that my media kids make, but also just the awesome things that are going on at McCool, because there's a lot of things that happen at small schools that I think the wider community should know about. We've got a social media account now on Facebook and Instagram. Go follow us, McCool Junction Student Media. And this year I'm going to have a few of our kids be essentially our social media team, where they'll make different creative, fun things to post to social media. They'll give news updates throughout the year, even from clubs and organizations at the school that aren't our own. And so it's just another way to not only give my media kids some valuable social media experience, because they're going to need to know that for any career they go into most likely, but also a fun and interactive way to show off our community and our school more. So long-winded answer, but there's a lot.
There's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Okay. That all is a huge portion of what you do, probably a majority of it, but you also help out with speech and one act. I guess talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. Speech and one act is near and dear to my heart. I firmly believe that I would not be the person that I am today without my experience on Doan's speech team in college. And so I had a lot of fun with it in high school, but it just took it to a whole nother level when I did it in college. I learned a lot about myself and about other people from around the country, got to meet so many cool people that just come from completely different backgrounds than I do. And so I've always wanted to be involved and give back to that community, and also show my students that they can gain the same thing from fine arts. So when I got the opportunity to coach, I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. So I am one of the assistant coach. Me and Brandy Strope are the assistant coaches for the speech and one act programs at McCool. And like I said, Sherry Thieman's the head coach. And so, right now we're getting ready to get our one act program off the ground this year. We'll have tryouts the very first full Monday of the school year coming up in just a couple weeks. And so we've been pretty successful in the years that I've been here, and Sherry's been successful for years before that too. But we've been in the top 2 of our district every single year so far that I've been here. We've gone to state once in the past 3 years with the Outsiders, and that was super awesome. And even though McCool is a small school, when we have a one act meet, pretty much the entire school's gone, because we have 60 to 70 kids on the one act team, from cast all the way down to crew and sound managers and lighting managers and all that stuff. And so there's 90 some kids in the high school at McCool. And so, we take 60 or 70 whenever we have a one act competition. And then speech, we usually range from 20 to 30 kids on the speech team every year. We've had a lot of success with that too. Last year we had the most kids qualify for state finals that we've ever had in the program's history. Finished in the top 5 teams in the entire state in D1 last year. We're back up to C2 this year, and we're just excited to kick some more butt.
Sure, absolutely. So I have to ask, and I know you're going to scoff at this question, so just bear with me. But let's say it is middle of speech season, middle of basketball season. What is a typical day like for you?
Especially, yeah, and we've had plenty of conversations about it. Speech season is much busier than one-act season, and I think that's not only due to the fact that speech meets are on Saturdays, and it just takes a bigger toll, but also the time of year that speech season occurs, like you said, during basketball season. It's just a way crazier, busy time of the year. So a typical day, I guess, for me during that point of the year, so on a day that we have home basketball games, it's just insane running around all day, making sure we have all the graphics ready for the broadcast, that I've got kids signed up for shifts to call the games and run the cameras and all that stuff. And during the school day, it's in between me teaching English and lessons and media. In my free periods or any free time, I'm running around and making sure everything is finalized and set up for the broadcast. And I will usually, after school, make sure everything's good to go in the gym, and then get ready to meet my kids there to just have a final meeting before I set them loose on the broadcast and let them call the game. And there's so many different components that I could get into that go into the broadcast, but I don't think we got time for that. So right after school, I'm doing that, making sure everything's good to go. And then it just depends on if we have speech practice that day. Usually our speech practices go from 6 to 9 p.m. during peak speech season, because obviously the sports have after school practice, so we have to work around that schedule. And other organizations too, they have FFA's got events, FBLA has meetings and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. On a basketball day, I usually go and check on the kids in the gym, then run back and do a coaching session with a kid or two, while I'm also like watching the broadcast on my phone at the same time to make sure nothing's going wrong, answering texts or phone calls if something does go wrong, and then going back to the gym and fixing something or checking on them, going back to the learning center to practice with a couple more kids. And yeah, on those days I get to school at about 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. And much to my wife's chagrin, sometimes I don't get home till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. But I love doing it. I love working with the kids. I love showing them how to do these skills that they can take later in life. Yes, I get tired, but any teacher gets tired. And people ask me, like, give me crap for getting summers off. I'm sorry, try to be a teacher for a week and you'll understand, especially today. So yeah, very busy during speech and basketball season. Yeah.
And it's busy during one-act season too, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But speech and basketball is when it starts to pick up.
I try something different every year, and I think I've gotten better at managing time. But it's a skill, especially when you're a teacher and you want to be involved, especially at a small school when we wear so many hats. So.
At Cornerstone Bank, we are committed to providing you the best in banking products and service. With 46 locations throughout Nebraska, we are dedicated to serve you. Cornerstone Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
And I'm going to wear the wife hat for a minute, but I think what people don't understand is, since your speech and one act and media and everything, you don't really have an off season. Like, you have events and meets and games and stuff from the day you start to the day you guys are out for summer.
Yeah, so me and Sherry and Brandy, we always joke. It's not really a joke. I mean, we coach for 7 months out of the 9 months that we're in school. Mm-hmm. So pretty much the whole year. And even after high school speech season is over, we have a little mini junior high speech season where we bring our junior high kids in for an hour after school, usually at least 2 or 3 times a week after high school speech season is over. And we take them to 2 meets too, because we think it's important to continue to build our program from 7th and 8th graders. And it's definitely helped our program grow. Yep. And so even after those 7 months are over, we're coaching some junior high kids. And this year, hopefully I'll have a couple kids qualify for state journalism for the first time at the end of April too. So yeah. So for any of my colleagues or anybody that visits the school, and you try to say hi to me and I just really quick say, hi, I gotta go, and I run off, like, it's not because I don't want to talk to you, it's because I'm working my butt off, which I love to do. And I appreciate all the opportunities and support that our admin gives us, and the community has been amazing in understanding that I'm teaching students and the students are trying their best. And yes, we make mistakes once in a while, but they're learning so much, and just the support has been awesome. So I really appreciate the community that we live in. Yeah, absolutely. And I do, once again, still wife hat, I have to give Sherry and Brandy some mad props too, especially Sherry, because she doesn't really take the summer either. There's camps, she's picking out plays, she's helping people with speeches already. And you do a little bit of that, but she takes it to a whole nother level. Yeah, and that's like kind of the good side and bad side about speech, especially. You can do it all year round. You don't need, and the great teams, and this goes for sports too, but the great teams that win state championships consistently, they put in work in the off season. And yeah, it's just what you got to do sometimes. Sometimes. Yeah. All right. I think I learned stuff, and I'm like your wife, so you don't already know some of it. So I hope you guys learned something. But we're going to go into our hot potato questions, which are very much like Coke or Pepsi type questions. So to start off with, I have to ask, let's see, sweet or salty? I think I like salty things more than sweet. I know you have the sweet tooth. I do. But I don't know. Growing up, my dad was the cook in the family, and he's a really good cook, and he taught me and my brothers how to cook. And you would never guess, but I'm half Italian. I look like a leprechaun, but so it was always like savory dishes of Italian. I've got Latino heritage too. We'd always cook that type of food too. So it was always salty or savory, and not much baking or sweets. I think that's where that comes from. Yeah. Fair enough. Fall or spring? Probably spring, just because I hate winter. I freaking hate winter, except for Christmas. Like when things start to warm up again and I don't have to worry about carrying a coat or wearing a coat anywhere. Like it's so freeing, and I love that feeling of being able to walk outside in shorts and a t-shirt. Although I love Husker football season, and being a dad now, like the fall is also a really fun time with kids, taking them to pumpkin patches, and Halloween's a fun time with the kids and whatnot too. So there's some really fun things that I like about fall, but I just love the feeling of warm weather. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Understandable. Oh, I'm trying to think of one that's going to throw you for a loop. Newspaper or radio? That's a hard one. I think I would lean towards newspaper. If anybody like comes and visits my classroom at McCool, we were in there the other day, me and you, and yesterday as I'm getting my room ready for the school year, and I know my room overwhelms you. Yeah. I've got a lot of... It's chaotic. I've got a lot of things hanging on the wall, and a lot of those are actually old newspapers. And so I've got some really cool newspapers in there from my time at Doane. I've got all the issues of the hoof prints that we've made so far hung up in the room. I've got some old newspapers that we found at a garage sale that highlight some historical moments like the Kennedy assassination. I've got a newspaper that that you gifted me from your grandparents, an original copy of the New York Times from the Great Depression, which is super cool. And then I also have McCool used to have its own town newspaper way back in the early 1900s. And one of my colleagues found some old copies of that, and I thought that was super cool, and so I framed those and hung them up as well. So I like the feel of a newspaper. I know that they're not super relevant in today's world anymore, but I think they're super cool still. I love putting them together. A lot of my experience in college was putting the OWL together at Doane. I did love working at the radio station too at Doane, and I love podcasts like we're doing right now and messing with audio, so it's fun still, the radio side of things, but I just have more experience on the newspaper side, and I just think they're just super cool to look back on, and I would lean towards newspapers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Music or podcasts?
Podcasts, and I think you might know that too.
Oh, yeah.
I like to listen to music, obviously, like everybody does, especially when I'm like exercising or something, but I'm a news junkie. That makes sense. And some people will probably roll their eyes, but I listen to a lot of politics as well. I like to stay updated. And again, I think that's just from my time in getting my journalism degree and my time in news. But I love just keeping up to date on the issues that are going around in the world and the country. And it's an election year, so I've been listening to a lot of politics. And I listen to politics and news podcasts, but I also listen to, there's this one from Vox called Unexplainable, that just talks about just topics that we don't know much about. And I just learning, like, podcasts are such an awesome way to learn new things. So I just like listening to podcasts that teach me things. I've been listening to a lot of 17 County podcasts lately, maybe to prepare myself a little bit for this, but there's some really cool people that you've talked to on this podcast that if you listen to the episodes, you'll learn things that you won't learn any other way. I learned a lot about Doug Rude, a lot about Kim Mortensen before coming here today, and you learn about community members and the things they do that you would never realize that they do just by taking the time to pop in some headphones and listen. So I will always be an advocate for podcasts because they're just a great medium to learn more about the world. And so long answer, podcasts.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate it. Okay, so I guess we can get to wrapping things up. So we have a multitude of people that listen from anywhere, any demographic, any age. Would you have any general advice for people, whether that be just about York County in general, or your line of work or whatever?
So I'll give two answers to that question. So first off, just in regards to the area and in regards to York County, I know a lot of the things that I do are centered around the McCool area, and yes, that's still in York County, but as far as just small towns in Nebraska in general and the York County area, like when I got into college, and you were with me for that experience too, that at first we were planning on moving out of state and going and experiencing, like we lived in Lincoln for a year in a bigger city, and there's good things about that. And sometimes, we miss living in Lincoln just because it has everything there. But when we moved back home and moved back to the York area and the McCool area, there's a sense of community that you're never going to get anywhere else. And I think anybody that's spent a decent amount of time in this area or areas like it knows that the people here, they're going to welcome you no matter who you are. If you're willing to contribute to the community and put yourself out there and show that you can work hard and volunteer, like, you're going to have a really good experience in places like this. And so my piece of advice for the teacher in me is thinking of teenagers immediately.
Yeah, fair enough.
But like, my piece of advice for anybody who's like trying to figure out what they want to do after high school or what they want to do after college, absolutely go out and experience the world. And even if I only went to college in Crete, but I got experiences. I got the chance to go around the country on the speech team and stuff like that. So like, at least spend some time going out and learning about other places in the world, but never be afraid after you've experienced something else and met different people to come back home, because we need to continue to grow our communities here, and young families is the way that's going to happen. So go experience something, but then always remember to come back and take the experiences that you've gained and bring those perspectives here, because that's the only way that these communities are going to continue to grow. And I think these communities are very important for not only Nebraska, but our country as a whole. That side of things, that's my advice for that. And then for career-wise or that kind of area, I would say just try things.
Walk through open doors.
Yes, walk through open doors. Don't be afraid to do something new or just try something you never even thought of. Like I said, I would have never thought I would have gotten into journalism or teaching. Even when I first graduated high school, I thought I was going to be an athletic trainer. Listen to people, actually think about like the suggestions that they give you and give things a try. You're never going to go anywhere in life or do anything that feels significant if you do not try things, even if you think they might be scary. And if they fail, like, that's fine. Just in the past 3 years that I started the media program at the school, like, we failed a lot, but I'm not going to stop trying to improve upon those things or stop trying to bring new things, because I know in the long run, it's going to benefit my community. If things don't work out, there's that old saying, what is it? Try again or something like that. Just keep trying in all aspects of life. You just got to keep trying. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure everyone who listens will appreciate it too. So.
And thank you. Like I said, you guys, I don't think people realize all the work that you and Lisa and Janine do at the YCDC. There's a lot of big impact that you guys bring to not only York, but the surrounding communities. So utilize them. Reach out to my wife if you have questions.
Please.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. In closing, we would like to once again take the time to thank our members, the people that help us drive change. We would like to thank York State Bank, Henderson State Bank, York General, Meade Lumber Company Incorporated, and York News Times. And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Catch you next time.